if we get zero failures out of these companies and they have the impact that they want, the number of people that are going to be impacted around the world, the efficiencies we're going to gain, the lives that are going to be saved, the lives that are going to be improved, yeah, it's just incredible.
Hi, my name is Leah, host of The Founder Mindset, or Why Would You Do This? This is a special episode that kicks off the bonus content we've made to go with the original 6-episode series. We thought it would kind of be interesting and insightful and fun to offer the investor perspective on these episodes from James Lochrie. James is the managing partner of Thin Air Labs. He leads the capital team and Thin Air Labs Fund 1, which is invested in 4 of the founders in this series: Alice, Alex, Brianne, and Eric. But who is this James Lochrie guy? How did he become an investor? What's his background? Hint, he co-founded a global fintech company called Wave. But there's so much more. Have a listen. So let's go right back to the beginning, shall we?
Let's do it.
How did you become an entrepreneur?
I think it was more of a journey of, discovery for myself going through a career. I was fortunate enough that my parents were both entrepreneurs at times in their lives. My mother ran her own daycare, nursery school that my parents both owned together. My dad later in life became an entrepreneur as a more of a consultancy. So I was able to see aspects of that as I was growing up. I also had to be resilient when I was a kid. If I wanted to buy candy bars or comic books, I had to go and shovel snow or rake leaves or those types of things. So there was always this aspect of entrepreneurialism that surrounded me. But also my parents were immigrants, and it was go to university, get a good job. That was the path to success. So that was beaten into me, and that was the path that I followed. But I really struggled through that. Even though I was in a career for almost 15 years with the accounting firm that I worked with, I was fortunate enough to be able to be moving from position to position with every 2 to 3 years. And that kept my interest, it kept my creativity going. But once I hit where I was ending up in life, and knew I couldn't go beyond that. The next role was the owner of the company, and I wasn't displacing him. And I had a similar, moment as some of our other entrepreneurs have expressed about what's my life going to look like? In 20 years, if I keep doing this, am I going to be satisfied, or am I going to look back and say I should have tried something, I should have risked something? And so that's what I did. I just had that moment of I do not want to look back in 20 years and say, This was not enough for me. I didn't do enough. I had other opportunities, and I didn't take that leap. And it was hard because it was in my late 30s that I made that decision. You have a lot of responsibilities. I had 3 kids. They were in private school, ski lessons, ski racing programs. All these competitive sports things. The money aspect, the financial aspect of it was very, very real. And but I just decided that I could do that, take that risk, fail, and still recover. Be able to go back to where I was, economically at least, without a big, big stretch. And sure, it might hurt for a little while, it might be a setback, but I felt like the risk was something I had to do.
Cool.
Yeah.
So then I guess that brings us to Wave. So how did that get started?
Again, it started from a place of uncomfortableness of where I was and that desire to try something different. I was obviously in that space, working in that industry. I saw a lot of opportunity that was coming with the migration of businesses into the cloud infrastructure that has now become dominant. It's just status quo now. But back then, there wasn't a lot of businesses that were operating on systems that were cloud-based. And accounting I saw as one that was really well positioned because all the data that surrounded accounting was digitized, and moving that onto the internet became a lot more effective and efficient at being able to do these things. So it was kind of a time and place was right for this type of opportunity. And then in working with my close friend Kirk Simpson, who was the CEO of Wave, I think we were right at the same time in our lives where we were both in this uncomfortable position, looking forward and saying, this isn't where we want to be. It's time to take a chance. And we both said, let's go and do it. And we expected it to be like this lifestyle side of our desk type of business. And within about a year, we realized that there was a lot more to it as far as what we could achieve. And people started paying attention, and it started taking off.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's exciting. Okay, so let's talk about the logistics there. So did you just leave your accounting safe job and go do this, or did you do it a little off the side of your desk at the time? What did that look like?
There was a little bit of off the side of the desk for a little while, but then I quickly, once it was something I wanted to commit myself to, I quit my job. Yeah.
How do you make that leap? I mean, I know I ask this question of all of our founders, but how do you do that?
I think it's some of it is like you just have to blindly trust yourself that you're going to go and do it and take that leap and not look back and not, second guess yourself, because you can't. Otherwise, you're just going to drown in your own regrets. But I don't really recall the moments. I remember the feelings. My wife at the time was very uncomfortable and remained uncomfortable through the journey around our finances. And that was a challenging moment. So I don't know how I actually made that decision, but I do remember it being very, very heartfelt, like something I had to do. Right. Like there was nothing that was going to stop me from taking this move and going after it. I felt like it was my opportunity. I felt like the opportunity was very, very real. Being a domain expert in the space, I felt like the opportunity to create something special was very, very real, and it came down to our ability to execute it rather than is the market going to be ready, those types of things. And it just came down to how big was that opportunity going to be. And it surpassed what we had ever imagined when we were starting out.
I bet.
Yeah.
I bet. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about that. So we've talked a little bit about what WAVE is, but what were some of the big challenges that you overcame as you were building WAVE? I'm sure there were many, but if you can think of a couple that were really meaningful.
Yeah, I think a lot of founders can go into, stories around fundraising and almost running out of cash and, pulling money out of your pocket and paying staff, those kinds of things. Those moments happened to us both in the early stages and the mid stages of the business. So there was a lot of risk throughout that business. I would say there was risk in that business right up until the exit, and so there was always that. And I could tell those stories, but I would say that some of the more challenging times were personal journeys and how the business evolved with us in it. And one of the biggest challenges was I was based in Calgary when we started the company, and I was building this out of the basement and flying to Toronto where we had a small team, and that's where Kirk was located. And that was the right place for the business to be located at that time. Calgary didn't have the established kind of tech infrastructure and talent around it. So that was something that in 2011 the business really started to take off, and by that time I was flying out every week and coming home on the weekends, and that was very, very challenging on the family. We made the decision to move to Toronto, and that was something that I had underestimated the impact on my life as it relates to family. And to remove 3 children from school and lessons and teams and friends and neighborhoods, communities, that was very, very hard. I probably suppressed those feelings from when I moved at that age when I was a kid, and I saw them go through that, and that was challenging. It was also challenging on Jane at the time to have to give up everything in her life and follow this dream. So that sacrifice that everybody had to put together was very, very challenging, and it affected relationships and how we bonded as a family, how we grew as a family. And then we reversed that and came back to Calgary, and that was also a big jolt on the flip side of that. So it was, I would say those aspects of it and the dedication that it required and the prioritization of the business versus the family, those were really the biggest challenges that I felt as a human being going through it. The business challenges, there were a lot of really difficult ones. There was a lot of stressful nights without sleeping. There was a lot of moments of tension with Kirk around disagreements about how we wanted to move forward with things. Not in a gunfight type of thing, but just different perspectives, different viewpoints challenging each other. There was always those types of things. There's always issues with people or finance, but I think the human journey of it is much more of the challenge and where people can get tripped up a lot. So that's where I would say I struggled the most.
For sure.
Was in that aspect of it. Yeah.
And then clearly you moved through that, and now here you are with the wisdom of some time to look back on it.
Yeah.
What do you think you would take away from that or have learned from that experience?
Yeah, and this is something that, having more failure in that area than success when I went through it is something I'm very conscious of today as I go through business, and it's something that I always talk to founders about, especially ones that are struggling with balance and burnout and those kinds of things. The relationships around you are so important, and there's different relationships you need to have. There's always those friends, the good friends that you can always just go and hang with and be the person that you are at your core without judgment. They don't know about your business or don't care about your business. They just care about you, right? So those people, they tend to get neglected because you're working 80 hours a week and you might take them for granted, and the opportunity to go for a beer or go out for the weekend or do the boys trip, all those things kind of get pushed aside. So those relationships are super important. So investing in that family, extended family, the support systems that you have, your immediate family, being able to carve out time. And it's not necessarily the quantity, it's the quality, and showing up on those big things, and also being able to say sorry.
For sure.
Because you can't always meet the expectations. Finding that balance, something that I was very, very bad at when I was an entrepreneur, especially in the wave days. I think that's really, really critical. And then there's one other cohort of people that I think entrepreneurs really need, other entrepreneurs that are going through it, have gone through it. They're the only people in the world that you can go, oh my God, this sucks, and I had this thing, and it blow off steam, and they understand. They're like, oh yeah, that happened to me, and I get it. Nobody else understands or really even sympathizes with those types of moments because they just can't grasp the depths of what you might have gone through in those days. And but other entrepreneurs, no, they've been there. Yeah. And it's a good support system for other entrepreneurs to be inside of.
For sure. All right, well, let's jump right ahead to the acquisition of Wave. So, the struggle was real, but the success was also very real.
Yeah, and, I think this is where, when I think about those later years of Wave, I had left my operating role. The business, I was focused much more on the innovation and the product in the early stages of the development of things. And that's what I'm good at, that 0 to 1 type of environment. So I had already left the organization because that skill set wasn't as required there, and there was lack of fit for me at that point in time. So I moved on to the board, was consulting with the company when required, always talking to Kirk, and my role at that stage was simply to support Kirk's success. That's where I moved myself into. Rather than being a contributor in the operations, I moved to more of a support system, which really prepared me for what came next. But that, when I look back at those years and how the business evolved, there is nothing but great things I can say about what Kirk did. The team that he put together after I left operations was incredible. The execution that they went after, the products that they built, the way they built them, the brand that they built, the team, the extended team, the awards they won. I wasn't sitting at the front row for those, so I put a lot of value on the people that were there, and especially the leadership that Kirk provided to get us to the exit. And that exit was something that, we had talked about since we started the company. Where would this thing go? We had a number of different stop-starts along the way. We had good handshake deals with CEOs for exits years previous. Unfortunately, we didn't take advantage of those. Or they didn't come to fruition the way we thought they would. And we had this one come up. And it was such an interesting time because we had actually signed a term sheet for a large investment round at the same time. So we were in diligence. I can't remember what it was, $40 million, $50 million or something was going on the balance sheet. We're all excited about where it was going. It was a pre-IPO round. We're looking at the public markets. They were opening up for us. And it was just like, oh, this is the right thing. We had this right thing. And along comes H&R Block, who had been talking to us in the investment stages and were giving us some signals. And I remember Kirk, kind of dripping some information into me as he was going through the process. And then there was the phone call. I'd just gotten off the airplane. I was in Las Vegas. It was my dad's 75th birthday celebration. My kids were with me, and I'm walking down to get a cab with my boys. And I get the phone call. And they've made an offer. And it was a serious offer. And the way that Kirk talked to me about it, I knew I knew that this was something that he wanted to pursue, and I knew it was something that he had prepped really well to get to the stage where it was at. So I knew it was very significant and real. And so that was a very interesting trip to Vegas as all this stuff was happening in the background. You know, you're putting $25 on black as the ball goes around the roulette wheel, and meanwhile, there's a $500 million deal on the table behind you, and nothing matters about what's happening in front of you. So I do remember those moments really, really clearly. And it was challenging because we had this investment round that was ongoing, and then this deal comes in. And if the investment doesn't come through, we're going to be capital constrained. So if we say no to the investment, say yes to the acquisition, and then the acquisition falls through, there's a lot of risk. So again, risk right up until the end of it. So we had to do a little bit of fancy dancing through that part, which Kirk steered the company very, very well through, and the board through that process while we negotiated price and all the other terms that came down to it. And then he led us through the diligence period where there was a lot. Again, diligence for a $500 million deal is very significant, and there's a lot of risk points in it. And we cleared all those hurdles as well. Even though there were times when I can remember late in the process, Kirk calling and saying, I don't know if we're going to get it done. And, you know, at that point, I'd been through this enough to know that even though they're serious, they want to get it done, the most likely outcome is it's not going to. So I had that in the back of my mind that this is not going to happen, even though there's a lot of signals. And then it happened. Then everything was signed. And I can remember I had to do a whole bunch of signing of documents. It was the last day, and it was a Friday afternoon. And I had to get it all done before the end of business that day. And I can remember friends texting me, come out for a beer, it's a beautiful day, blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like, ignore. I got to get all this paperwork done. And then it was done. And it was done. It was just one of those moments of, I was alone in my home, and I had finished, I put my computer down, I just sat there, and it was done. It was 10 years, almost to the day that we started the company, 10 years. I think we fell 9 days short of our 10-year anniversary before we exited, and just had this moment of reflection, joy, sadness, pride, a lot of pride that the brand would continue on in its state and still has continued to. So that's really nice. But a lot of reflection about the good and bad times and what it meant. And, not just on the business side, on the personal side. There was a lot of damage in my personal life over time. There was a lot of sacrifice, a lot of relationships that had been dented or ruined because of inattention or distraction. And that was it was a moment of, like, I had achieved something, and there was a cost to it, and there was joy to it, and there was sadness to it, and I had that moment on Friday afternoon into the evening, and maybe even over through the weekend. I probably didn't even leave the house the next day, and I just let the feelings happen for that time, and it was great. It was great. It was very grounding, and I really appreciated that I kept that to myself for 24 hours, and I didn't share it with anybody else until later, when those feelings had settled and I had been grounded a little bit more. And so it was I really want all of our founders to feel that. Yeah. And I want to feel that with them. Sure. I want to have a piece of that, because it was such a unique experience. And, it's kind of like winning a championship or anything, a pursuit and achieving something that is so long and getting to that end point, and all of the things that come to it. And that's why we have this philosophy at Thin Air about no failures. Yeah. It's because I want everybody that puts in that effort, that has that drive, desire to have that achievement, to help that many people. I want them to feel that too. So that's an important part of how I operate when I'm dealing with our founders that are our family, right, in this journey. And so thank you for asking that. It was nice to have time I haven't gone back to that moment, but I'm remembering. I can still see myself sitting on the couch, the computer, and just kind of staring at the wall. There was nobody in there. My dog was there with me, luckily, so he reflected some of those feelings.
I bet.
Yeah.
I love that you took a moment just to process that. Yeah. Because that's big.
Well, it was either that or it's like, fuel up the jet, let's go to Vegas, everybody. And let's, all of a sudden, all the money's gone.
I bet, to say the least. Wonderful. So thank you for sharing all of that. So now you've got all this money, right? And you're trying to think to yourself, okay, what am I going to do with this? You could have just gone and sat on a beach, which I know you like to do.
I do, yeah.
So how did you decide that you were going to do this as an angel investor first?
Yeah, I had the experience of being able to play around for a couple of years previously. And I took that time. It was actually Dave Yulakar. I was talking to him about investing, and he was wise enough to give me a picture of how investors need to think. And there's different segments of investors. There's small angel investors that you're just putting in a little bit, you're a quiet investor. There's somebody who's more active, and there's somebody that raises capital from other people and deploys that. And that's a much more structured and sophisticated way of doing things. You have a lot more responsibility with other people's money and process that comes with that. So I needed to figure that out, and I decided, well, the best way to do that is just to get my fingernails dirty. So what I did, I started in 2016, just started volunteering my time and meeting as many founders as I could, figuring out what they were doing, offering my help, giving a little bit of guidance, making some introductions, those kinds of things, and just trying to be productive and give a little bit back to the community that had given me so much. And in that process, I started seeing entrepreneurs that were working on projects I was quite interested in, thought I could help with, and then started making some investments. And so we made 4 investments over a couple of years, and slowly continued to work with those companies. And as they became more successful and started to scale up over periods of time, I started asking for help from my network and bringing in this person as an advisor or bringing in this person for a conversation and those kinds of things. Before I knew it, I had this circle of people that were around me that were helping these companies. And then, partially luck, partially skill, 3 of those 4 companies became fairly large, and I think we're going to talk about those in a little while. But they scaled up so quickly and became so successful. It begged the question of whether it was just pure luck or whether there was some skill there. And I, of course, just said, "Oh, it's all pure skill. I'm awesome at this, and I'm really good at. I'm going to continue to be awesome at it." But I did take some time to think about why I was successful, and it really came down to big markets and being able to choose projects that were going to be able to be innovative and disruptive in new markets or existing markets, and then people. And when I looked at the success, it was really driven by those founders. And when I look back at the journey of Wave, Kirk and I together in the first 6 years of that company, we were beasts inside of that company. And then the ending years, Kirk was a monster inside of that company. He would not be denied success. And you could see that prevalent in the founders that we had invested in. And so that started developing a thesis. There was a lot of excitement around me and what I was able to do in the community with, just some words of encouragement as things were developing. And the brand of Thin Air Labs came to life in 2018 as I started formalizing the team a little bit more and trying to figure out how we wanted to move forward. And then, I got a lot of signals that people were interested in giving me money to manage and make these investments. And so I started having more and more conversations 2019 into 2020 about that, and then it was 2022, early Q1 2022 when we started raising outside capital for the first time. Yeah, and wow, what a journey that was.
Right?
Yeah.
No kidding. Before we even get into that, let's talk a little bit about this track record that you sort of amassed with this angel investing. Let's talk specifically about a few of those companies because, from those investments, you sort of alluded to the fact that that was sort of the formation of the investment thesis that went on to be the investment thesis for Thin Air Labs and Thin Air Fund 1. So let's talk a little bit about maybe Cement to start off with. So tell us a little bit about Cement and what really intrigued you about this company and why you decided to invest in it.
Yeah, the Cement is a great story because it's a company that Hanif and I had been friends for quite a while. We had invested together into one of the other two of the other companies in those early years. And so I was advising him at the time on a company that he had started with 3 other co-founders. And it was an interesting company that had some success, but there was this dynamic inside of the organization that just was a little bit unusual around how leadership happened. And what I discovered through that is Hanif is a monster of a leader. As I got to know him better and I saw this organization function, they had this this leadership style that was all four co-founders were making decisions instead of one. And that can work in some ways and be challenged in others. And I think with somebody like Hanif, there was a lot of challenge in that because he is the guy. And he wants to be the guy. And so he came to me and said, I've started a new company, or I'm starting a new company. This is what the idea is. And we were just walking on 17th Avenue. He took me out for coffee, and we were just walking around. And he's telling me about the idea. And the whole time he's telling me this idea, I'm like, this is shit. What are you doing? Go back to your other what's going on here? Like, this is, why do you want to get into debt collecting type of environment? Don't you want to? And then over the course of a couple of meetings, I understood where he was coming from, and the core of his past, understanding where he came from, investment banking and understanding the debt markets, gave him the viewpoint of how debt worked in these systems, and he saw the inefficiencies of how consumer debt played out, delinquent consumer debt played out in the market. And he also had that personal experience of being on the wrong side of debt collectors. As a refugee who had come to Canada, his family struggled, had gone through that. And so there was this building story of human experience with professional experience and understanding the market. And then he's this incredible operator, this incredible driver, this an unstoppable force of energy that just continues to run through walls. And eventually he convinced me to give him some money. And I wasn't fully convinced yet on the business, but I was very, very convinced about him. And so that is it's such an interesting story. You talk about getting lucky. Had he not been really forceful in continuing to pursue me as an investor, had he not taken the time and care to walk me through everything, I probably wouldn't have invested in the company. And so timing, luck, all of those things play into it. And I was fortunate enough to just continue to be close friends with him as he went through it, and we were able to double down on that investment and continue to see a lot of growth out of it. It's been our number one investment, my biggest returning investment that I've ever had outside of Wave, which I was also the seed investor in Wave as well. So that seed betting stuff, it seems to be just work out for me.
It sure does. It sure does.
Yeah.
Okay, that's cement. Let's talk a little bit about Stellar Algo.
Yeah, Stellar Algo is great. Vince had come back to Calgary. I got introduced to him by a close friend who ended up being the lead investor into that company on the seed round, and I was very fortunate enough to be invited into that. I had been advising Vince for, 12, 18 months around how to move from where he was as basically a service and how to develop a company around becoming a product. And there's some introductions and a little bit of guidance around this and that we did. But it was obvious from the beginning that Vince had something, and if he could pivot that into a productized version of his service, that it could be something very significant. And now he's proving that out in spades. That's a company that has been greatly impacted by the pandemic, as all of their customers had to shut their doors. Sports teams were down and out for a while, and there was a great amount of uncertainty. What was interesting about that is as the pandemic hit, Vince was actually raising his second amount of capital, and he had only raised $1 million on his first round, and he was only raising $1.5 million on the second, and we had already had a handshake deal that I was going to lead it personally with my own capital, and we had some other investors internal that were already going to invest as well, and then we had, I think, a couple that were coming from the outside. Very, very tight round that we were doing, and then the pandemic hit, and it all fell apart, and Vince was left scrambling. And this, black swan event that came at the absolute worst time for him. And, I just said to him at that time, listen, I've made a promise to you that I am going to invest in your round. I'm still going to do that. Let's get the other investors together. Our close friend Todd, who led the first round, was instrumental in coordinating all of the other investors. The conversations required. It took a number of weeks for us all to get on the same page. And we finally closed. It was just $1.5 million that we closed. And it was one of those things that was like, this business could be out of business in 3 or 6 months, even though they have this money. Who knows? And I just came back to the thesis of the Yankees are one of their customers. They are continuing to pay them today. And I'm confident that the Yankees will play in front of fans again in the future, as will all other sports teams. I'm confident of that. Knock on wood.
Yeah.
And it ended up happening. And so, and then they were able to grow through COVID, not as much as we had planned, but they were able to be successful through COVID. And then after COVID left,
just gone gangbusters.
They just caught fire, and the market was open again for them. And they had improved so much of their business through that. Definitely one of the highly performant businesses that I've been around. Very, very thoughtful team around how they build product and approach their customers. Incredibly strategic decision making around how this market is going to continue to evolve and where they play into it. Very exciting. Even though we've been in this now for, I don't know, 5, 6 years now, I'm much more excited about the next 5 years, even though the first 5 years have been incredible. Yeah.
That's so exciting. We could keep going through your investment thesis, but I'm mindful of the time. So let's move on to this notion of venture capital. So you sort of came up with this thesis, your investment thesis, as you were making these angel investments.
Yes.
And so that led to Thin Air Labs. So let's talk a little bit about the formation of Thin Air Labs, and maybe first off, why you even decided to locate Thin Air Labs in Alberta.
Yeah, that's a great question. In 2015, when I had left my role at Wave, I was trying to figure out what's next for me and where do I want to be. And fortunately, right after I left that, I took a little bit of time, like 2 weeks, turned off everything. And I read a book called Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell. A lot of people have read that book. And there was this concept in there called being a big fish in a small pond. And at that time, I had. Then I subsequently went and just did a bunch of networking around Toronto. What are you guys up to? When I was heads down at the office, I didn't do a lot of network. I didn't know I didn't make a lot of friends. So I then started doing that, and I realized I was just another Joe Blow in a big city of people that had done a lot of these things before. There was not really an advantage to me being there. I would have to work as hard as everybody else, and maybe 2-3 weeks after that, I had visited Calgary for personal reasons, family reasons, and I took some time to walk around, maybe a day or two to walk around and meet a few people here, and I recognized instantly there was a difference. There was a difference in how the community operated, the way that people collaborated, opened doors for each other. Not to say that doesn't happen in Ontario or in Toronto, but much more so here. It's a small, big city. The community is very, very tight and well knitted in together. And once you have open doors there, all of them are open. Mm-hmm. Whereas in Toronto, I didn't feel that same way. I didn't go to the right schools in Toronto. I don't have a cottage in the right places. I didn't have that clique of people that I grew up with. But in Calgary, I didn't need it. The other thing about Calgary that was interesting, and I would say Alberta more generally, was at that time the ecosystem was quite small, but there was momentum behind it. There was some wind in the sails, while at the same time the energy industry was really, really tanking. And that creates an enormous amount of pressure on Alberta when that happens. Very, very difficult time. If you're not in Alberta or Saskatchewan during that time, you don't understand how devastating that is for the economy out here and how that affects how people even just think and move through the day and the mood of the city. And I could feel this tension. As you had conversations with established people that had been here a long time, you could feel this tension around the destruction of capital, the uncertainty of the future, job loss, all of these things, and it was for years that we felt that. And the silver lining on that is that allowed other people who were highly educated, sophisticated, experienced people that were problem solvers that are used to tackling really, really big problems in our industrialized economy. They had nothing to do. Yeah. And so there was, at one point, there was 35,000 unemployed engineers in this city. Engineers don't get unemployed at that scale, are not unemployed for long, right? It's just that people need engineers to build stuff. And so we had this really interesting time in Calgary and Alberta where there was capital on the sidelines. There was people that were not investing in traditional asset classes that they normally did locally. And then there was this emergence of tech, which had wind in its sails with some of the other success stories, Benevity, Solium, those types of players had already returned some capital to people. People were excited about what they had done, and it gave confidence to people that it actually, you could be successful in this sector in Alberta now. And that was a really compelling part of coming in here and being able to establish a brand that had gravitas against a growing market. And so that's really the strategy, was just to come in here and fall in love with founders. Mm-hmm. Help them as much as we possibly could, whether we were investing in them or not, trying to be that community support system where we could help guide, whether it's, the university wants a perspective or the municipal, provincial governments want perspective, we can add that. We want to participate in helping everything accelerate. And so we just did that. Established a great brand, raised the money, started making investments. The investments taking off helped the brand, helped people see that we are the type of company that want to create great companies at a global scale. We don't want to just turn over capital and 2x it or 3x it. We want 100x capital. We want our entrepreneurs to be massively successful. And so we just started doing the little things that required that to happen. And, I think we were very, very fortunate to have some great people like yourself join the journey and help contribute to all of those pieces. And when I look at where we've established ourselves today in this market and the reputation we have and the trust that we have built, it really comes down to how that vision of focusing on founders and just being successful and putting our ego in our back pocket, making sure that everything we do is about them, that has permeated throughout our entire organization, and it's attracted the same type of people that have that mindset of being in service to something, and the team represents that incredibly well. That's the reason why we've been successful, is everybody carries that in every conversation with our founders, and it trickles into the outcomes that we can provide to them. That trust level is so high, which is, when you think about starting a company and the goals you have, when that is present, that's an immense amount of pride that I have about what Thin Air Labs has become and what we can do in the future based on that. So, yeah, that's Thin Air Labs.
Yeah, it sure is.
Yeah.
Let's dig into that just a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about Thin Air Labs Fund 1 specifically, and what it is and the thesis behind it.
Yeah, it's Fund 1 is really the thing to keep me off the beach. It's the board game or card game that I want to continue playing, and the problems I want to continue challenging myself with, and working with great people on very specific problems in a venture or very general problems at the macro scale in managing the capital allocation of a fund. So that's really the purpose behind it, was really just to challenge me and utilize the thesis that we had brought into the wave, then moved into the Fund Zero investments that we had done, and then do it at scale. And so far, so good. I think the whole journey has been a learning process for myself and the investment team around how to allocate capital appropriately into a portfolio. It's been a great learning experience on how to deal with fund investors, both institutional, high net worth, or individuals who want to play. And it's been an amazing journey around developing relationships and how important relationships are in this world, versus as an entrepreneur raising capital, it's really transactional when you're doing it. And you hope to move it into a very strong relationship with the person who becomes your board member or advisor, or whoever it might be. But in this game, when you're raising institutional money for funds, it tends to be based on that relationship much more so than anything else. And that caught me by surprise. I went into it with a naivety that, hey, look at my track record, look at Wave, look at my other investments. I literally am, on paper, one of the most successful angel investors in Canadian history. And hopefully that continues to be the case. But that doesn't matter as much as, hey, I don't know who you are. I don't trust you yet. I don't know what systems you have in place. I don't know if you're somebody that is going to make the right decisions over the long term on these things that have nothing to do with how to manage a business. You're good at managing a business. You're good at creating product. I don't know if you're good at managing the allocation of capital into a portfolio. So it's those kinds of challenges that we've had to, as first-time fund managers, have had to overcome. And it was a big part of the reason why we added somebody like Raghu to the fund, with his experience in that market, being in a traditional VC environment, a banking VC environment where regulatory environment is very, very heavy. We wanted to have that expertise brought in. We didn't want to learn that stuff on the fly. And I always joke with him, it's like, your job 100% of the time is to keep me out of jail. Right?
And he does it very well.
Yeah, he does it well.
He does it very well.
Yeah, it's been a journey raising Fund 1, but what I love about it is it's allowed us to go much broader with the number of entrepreneurs that we can approach. It's allowed us to be more bold in the bets that we make. With confidence, when we have that confidence to, because we have more capital behind us around how we want to play it over time. And it's allowed me to have a broader sense of how other people, our investors, can both guide us and also help our portfolio companies. So, I do respect our LPs a lot. I think they have a lot that they can continue teaching us. And I love that reciprocal type of relationship because a lot of them are still fairly new in this space. And we can provide a lot of wisdom to them as they continue to look at options and how they want to run their own money, especially the family offices that are involved with us that maybe are making their first venture investment ever. But that maybe shouldn't be their last. Maybe they should be looking at other funds and participating in those to get a broader risk profile on venture. Or maybe they don't want to. Maybe they just want to be focused in on us and learning. And maybe developing something internally that they want to build. That's another strategy that we see high net worth families doing is learn from what professionals are doing, then build it yourself. So we want to be helpful across the board, not just to our portfolio, but to our investors as well, because we owe them. We owe them because they gave us the money to be able to do what we're doing at scale. So
for sure.
Yeah.
So we're looking today, I guess, we can say 21 companies.
21 companies, yes, today.
And they're all doing well.
Yeah, they're all successful thus far, knock on wood. We do have that philosophy of no failures, and I think that part of the reason we have no failures is because we focus on having no failures. I'm confident that we probably will have failures in the future as people take risks. There's unknowns out there. There's stray bullets that can catch you, things that are outside of people's control. But I think the reality of our portfolio today is the selection of companies, markets that we've gone over, the solutions that they're bringing into those markets to solve the problems. Those solutions are valuable. They're solving real problems that have scale. And so the opportunity, even in not achieving their ultimate goal, but the opportunity even at 25% success, or becoming the third best in market instead of the first best in market, still very significant. And we have a lot of companies that are doing very, very novel things in brand new markets or disrupting very, very established markets that are maybe 20, 30, 40 years old, that have this incredible momentum behind them that it creates a lot of excitement. The danger is getting too far ahead of yourself on these things because there's always something around that next corner that you're going to bump your head on. But there's just a lot of very, very good signals out of our companies today that they will continue to have success. And I think that's really just based on those entrepreneurs. And we talked about them our entrepreneurs being mission-driven. And the relentlessness that we have been able to find in entrepreneurs that we have backed is probably the reason why we've been so successful. And then we, again, I look at our team and everybody knows and behaves the way that they need to make sure that our everything that we do supports those entrepreneurs and their success instead of detracting from it or slowing them down. The worst thing you can do is slow down an entrepreneur. Sure. Like it's just one of those things that drives them crazy. have been called out on it myself because sometimes things fall through the cracks and it just makes you feel bad. So, I think it's just across the board, from the investments to the funding catalyst team, the product traction team, to the work that you do in telling stories and helping people get over that fear of talking about themselves or being in the public eye. All of those little things have added up to a lot of success inside of the portfolio, but it's mostly driven by them, right? I think that's the important thing. I don't want to make anybody believe that these people would not be successful had they not met us. I'm sure they would be. We hopefully have helped accelerate some of the success that they would have had, regardless of our involvement. It really is them. We're very, very lucky and fortunate to have had the opportunity to meet these founders, understand what their business is, having alignment with how they want to grow and how we want to invest. It truly is a privilege to be able to invest in these companies and work with these people. And that is something I never want to lose track of, that privilege, because the moment you think you're the one in the seat is the moment you start failing the founder, and then you start failing your investors, and you start failing, period. That's my philosophy on it. It's as soon as you think you're more important than your founder, you're dead. And your founders will know it too.
Of course.
So it's one of those things I just really want to be focused on. And part of that is coming out of Wave. I was 99.9% sure I didn't want to operate a business again. And so I recognized that if I wanted that to be true, I needed greatness in that seat all the time. And I had this amazing benchmark of Kirk, right? So having,
you knew what it looked like.
10 years of sitting beside this guy who has become one of the best CEOs in technology in Canadian history. He's working on now a second major venture-backed company, very well respected, incredibly articulate about product and how businesses are built, an incredible networker. So I've got to see all of these great things. And I also got to see when he was younger and where he wasn't that person, and how he evolved and changed and dedicated himself to learning and growth and becoming a great leader, a great CEO, a great investment relations person, a great manager of a board. I saw him do all those things where he may have been a 5 out of 10 on some of those things previously. He became an 8, a 9, a 10 on some of those things. And so having that experience and that background and that benchmark that he set of what greatness could look like, or a version of greatness, just helps it a lot, to be able to.
You know what you're looking for.
Yeah, you know what you're looking for.
Yeah.
When a guy like Hanif comes up and you're like, oh my God, you might be as crazy as Kirk.
There is something to that, isn't there?
You might. I would love to see you two play cornhole, because you guys would probably at the end of it have a sword fight.
They probably would. Let's take a moment to talk just quickly about a couple of the companies in Thin Air Fund 1.
Yeah.
Of course, they can listen to the podcast and hear several of them. But let's talk a little bit about Philip, for example.
Yeah.
And Alice Reimer.
Alice Reimer. Yeah, this is a company that I look at and say they have an incredible niche opportunity, niche in a big market, and internationally focused. I can't say enough about Alice and her ability to execute, her leadership style, the way that she approaches problem solving, team, networking, very, very strong. Never in doubt when I was talking about this company. The leadership, the entrepreneur was never in doubt. The questions I always had about this one was, how big could it be? How do the economics work? Once I had understood where they were heading, it became apparent that the core aspect of how the company grew, taking that transactional type of SaaS play in enterprise, but then the ability to layer into that everything that goes around financial transactions, potentially credit. There was a bleed from fuel or electrical fueling into, commissary type of things, or car washes, those things. Insurance was potentially on the table. There was just layers to the opportunity that, made it much more exciting than a very basic play on the core technology and the core offering. And that's where I get really excited about companies, especially when there's a fintech layer inside of it that I really understand well, and our team here can help execute against it and provide a lot of guidance for. And so that was the attractable the really attractive thing about this was there was multiple layers into the opportunity. And then as I started digging into some of the spreadsheets, Alice was incredibly well prepared. And when I asked her for data, it was just, here you go. It just became apparent that if she was able to execute at a high level and the market bent a little bit her way, she could create something very significant. And that was the bet. That was the original bet, was let's see what you do with it. And I think now we've made 3 investments. We participated in 3 rounds, most recently earlier this year. And they just continue to execute really well, and they continue to hit their milestones. Still a very risky business from the standpoint of it's much more of a land grab type of business. And in today's environment, when the land grab doesn't necessarily mean revenue numbers on the front, the land grab projects revenue into the future. That's the same type of play that Wave was. But in this environment that we're in today, where capital is much tighter, that's a lot riskier because people may not value that the same way they did, say, 2 years, 3 years ago. So the push into revenue and making sure that we can flip that opportunity is going to be very critical for this company moving forward. But it's well planned out, and I know they've got the team to do it. So it's just a matter of just continuing to execute really well. They've got a very strong plan and making sure they don't get too far ahead of themselves, and ensuring that their balance sheet is always strong. That's the same for every company. The balance sheet needs to be strong. That's where risk happens the most significantly. So
exciting.
Yeah.
That's one to watch for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
Because we are getting close to time, I'm going to just ask you about one other company in Thinner One. So why don't we talk about Clinify? Because this is a really special one.
It is. It is. Michael, having migrated or immigrated from Nigeria when he was younger with his family, settling in Calgary, becoming an engineer and working with IBM and installing the Epic healthcare system into Alberta Health Services, and then having a personal tragedy in his life where medical records or the lack thereof of medical records caused the death of one of his family members back home. And he took that opportunity of learning the whole system to figure out what he could do to build a similar type of system for Africa. And what I found fascinating about this is there are different types of ways of approaching building a product. There's I'm going to copy. Nothing wrong with that in a lot of cases. There's no reason to reinvent the wheel most of the time. But he didn't do that. He took the best of what was happening in Epic, and then he looked at the market in Africa and he figured out what was different. Number of doctors per patient, 20 times higher in Canada than it is in Africa. The distance, the connectivity of patients, how the financial aspects of medical transactions work. Analyzed all of these pieces to put together a full service suite that mirrored what he had implemented in Alberta, but for the African market with an initial focus on Nigeria. When he came up to us and told me about this, he grabbed me. I was at an event at Platform, and he just grabbed me by the arm and said, "Hey, I want to talk to you about this." And he started telling me about it, and I was like, "This sounds really big, like too big to be real, kind of thing." And so then he came in and pitched us, and then we were like, I had no idea that the product was built, and then he started showing it to us. So here's all the EMR, here's the telemedicine, here's the prescription stuff, here's all, and on and on and on it went, and it was all working. And I'm like, what? Wait a second. Hang on a sec. How do you have this? Wait a minute. This is a massive system. He's just like, I just went in my basement for a year and created it. And it wasn't picture perfect yet. There was still some refinement that needed to be done, and continues to build out a lot of things within that platform. But it was one of those moments that, and then you start talking to Michael. Michael's a very special person when it comes to his business and the heart behind it. Mm-hmm. He needs this to happen. As somebody who's native from Nigeria and has seen the difference of what the Canadian healthcare system provides versus an African healthcare system, he wants his fellow Africans to have that level of care and service. He wants the fraud, that's the financial fraud that happens in the medical system, to go away, which is significant in Africa. He wants the ability for people that are international who have been helping financially people back home to be able to do that in a much more effective way. So he's even built those types of tools into how this system works. And it's just one of those plays where it was so easy to make the decision. I mean, there's a lot of validation that has to go into a market like that, and the due diligence was pretty heavy. And I know that Michael was frustrated in going through that, but there's something happening in Nigeria. That's a whole world away. We don't understand that market, and it took us a long time to become comfortable with saying yes to the investment, because we have to be responsible to our LPs. But going through that was just a process of. It just continued to say yes to all of the things that we had already understood about the business. And I think this is one of those plays that, should Michael be successful, not only could have a significant financial return both to him and the investors that he brings along with him, it could be one of the biggest companies that comes out of Canada if he's successful at the scale that he could potentially be successful at. And so we're excited about what could occur, but the other side of that is, can you imagine like living in an environment today where we take for granted the ability to go to a doctor or get this, look up our health records, share our health records, whatever those types of things are, that just doesn't exist there. The level of care is not what we're used to, and we take that for granted. But if we can provide that into another part of the world that is developing, that will have massive impacts over there. And those impacts will have impacts on us over time. When the world is a healthier place, the world is a healthier place, right? And that spreads. And whether that's pandemics or disease or treatments of how different types of medicines affect different types of populations, being able to track those things, and over time, this would be a monumental impact to the global society upon success. So it's just one of those that's like, thank you for introducing yourself to us. Thank you for knocking on our door. And thank you for the privilege of being able to allow us into this journey with you. We're going to do whatever we can to make you happy and successful in that journey. And still very early, but Michael's a hustler. He's a hustler, and he's been spending a lot of time over there, and he's getting some signatures on paper. So we're very excited about where this could all go. But again, still very early, and a lot of work to do. These journeys are typically 7 to 10 years long, and we're only in the first inning of this one. So we'll see where it all goes. But there's a lot of potential there, and that's what I love about the portfolio. You can go through every single company and talk about where that massive impact can be. And it's not always as obvious as where it is for Clinify, but the impacts are so big and significant throughout our portfolio. Just that's one of the things that, when you think about zero failures, like, man, if we get zero failures out of these companies and they have the impact that they want, the number of people that are going to be impacted around the world, the efficiencies we're going to gain, the lives that are going to be saved, the lives that are going to be improved. Yeah, it's just incredible. That's why I do this. That's why I don't sit on a beach. I need that challenge, but I also need that, that piece of goodness that comes along with it. I need that motivation that, when you get that, hear that story about how a company saved this life or did this for this person, it's just, that feeds me. And I need it. You don't get that from sitting on the beach reading a book. I enjoy that.
Of course.
For a moment.
Yeah.
And then it's back to work. It's not really work either, right? It's more of a hobby. I can't say that really out loud too many times, especially to investors. But that's truly how I view it. Is I'm very grateful to have a hobby that I can spend a lot of time in and enjoy and create these great relationships and outcomes. So, and hopefully make a shit ton of money for us, our team, our investors, and most importantly for our founders. Yeah.
Okay, let's look down the road. Let's look to the future. I know you care very deeply about the founders that you've invested in and what they're trying to build. What is your vision or hope for these companies?
Yeah, I want every single one of them to be successful. I want them to be both successful financially for good financial outcomes for our founders, primarily because I want them to have success in life. Because of this, I want them to be rewarded for the sacrifice they're making for other people. And within that is also, once founders become successful, they tend to give back. They invest in other companies. They might spend some time advising. They may go and work for another company in the future. That virtuous cycle of how success breeds success into the future, that layering of success into that next generation of success is super important. So that's part of it. The other part of it is I want them to feel the joy of the impact that they want to have. I want them to have those moments that I've had of recognizing the way the world used to be before they arrived to where it is today. I want them to be able to go to bed feeling that when it's all said and done. And I want them to be able to carry that throughout the rest of their lives, talk to their grandkids about it. That's kind of, if we think about the success of founders, if we are able to put all of our energy into making those two things happen, our company, our investors will be immensely successful as well. So I love that we can frame up the financial success of our business through the personal success of other people, because it makes it so easy to just get up in the morning and focus on that rather than a number on a spreadsheet. Let's focus on this person's struggling today. Let's spend some time with them. This person has amazing opportunity. They don't know how to deal with it. Let's help them figure that one out. This person just won. Let's go out for a beer and celebrate with them. That's what I really want. That's the journey. The end point is fun, and it's fun to celebrate that end point. But the journey is where I want to enjoy every single day against those moments and have those outcomes that I get to watch other people enjoy. And hopefully we as a team get to have a little snippet of it too. So that's thin air.
Thank you, James.
You're welcome.
Innovative ideas are just that, ideas, until they have the right kind of backing to make them a reality. Enter the Opportunity Calgary Investment Fund. Established by the City of Calgary to attract investment, drive innovation, and stimulate economic development, it gives innovators the launchpad they need to take flight. After all, there's a reason opportunity is in its name. By supporting public and private organizations that help grow Calgary's economy, it's creating opportunities for everyone to reach new heights. Find out more at opportunitycalgary.com.